Every morning across this country, tens of millions of seniors wake up, go to their kitchen, and eat a breakfast that is actively accelerating the loss of the muscle they depend on for independence, for mobility, for the basic physical competence that separates a functional life from a dependent one. They do not know this. Nobody told them. In many cases, they were told the opposite, that the breakfast they are eating is healthy, balanced, appropriate for their age, heart-smart, low-fat, fortified with vitamins and minerals, and backed by the guidance of the same institutions that have been advising the American public on nutrition for the past 60 years. Some of that advice produced one of the greatest nutritional failures in modern history, and the senior population is living in the body that failure produced. I am 86 years old. I have not eaten a grain-based, low-protein, processed carbohydrate breakfast in my adult life. Not once, not on the road, not on holidays, not in a moment of convenience, because I understood from watching the people who aged well and the people who aged poorly before I had the research to explain what I was observing, that the first meal of the day was not a casual dietary event. It was the most metabolically important meal of the day for an older adult. The meal that either converted the morning's cortisol peak from a catabolic event into an anabolic one or left it as a catabolic one by default. The meal that either activated the TOR pathway and began the day in a state of muscle protein synthesis or missed the threshold and allowed net muscle protein breakdown to continue through the morning. The meal that either stabilized blood glucose for the first 6 hours of the day or sent it spiking and crashing before 9 in the morning, initiating the insulin cycle that promotes fat storage and impairs the metabolic environment that muscle maintenance depends on. The breakfast I am talking about, the one doing the most damage to the most seniors right now, is not a single product, it is a category. It is the grain-based, low-fat, high-carbohydrate, processed breakfast that the food industry built and that the dietary guidelines of the 1970s legitimized. Cereal with low-fat milk, oatmeal with fruit juice, toast with margarine and jam, a bagel, a muffin, low-fat yogurt with granola, pastries, a protein bar with 17 ingredients and 12 grams of sugar. Any combination of these things that delivers high carbohydrate, low complete protein, low dietary fat, and the kind of rapid blood glucose elevation that an older adult's metabolically compromised system is the least equipped to manage. This is the breakfast that a significant proportion of seniors eat every morning in the sincere belief that they are taking care of themselves while their muscle tissue breaks down, their insulin resistance deepens, and their hormonal environment moves steadily in the wrong direction. Let me explain exactly what happens in the body of a senior who eats this breakfast, starting the moment they wake up and ending at mid-morning. When an older adult wakes, cortisol rises sharply in the first 30 minutes. The cortisol awakening response that the body uses to mobilize energy and prepare for the demands of the day. This cortisol is catabolic in the absence of dietary protein. It breaks muscle tissue down, releasing amino acids into the bloodstream to fuel the body's morning energy needs. This is a normal physiological process, and it is not a problem in itself. The problem is what happens when the person then eats a high-carbohydrate, low-protein breakfast. The rapid glucose from the cereal, toast, or oatmeal produces a blood glucose spike. The spike triggers an insulin release proportional to the glucose load. The insulin spike suppresses fat mobilization, promotes glucose uptake, and in an older body with established insulin resistance, creates a sharp crash in blood glucose 1 to 2 hours later that produces the mid-morning fatigue, brain fog, and hunger that most seniors accept as a normal morning experience. None of it is normal. All of it is the biological consequence of a breakfast that was wrong for their physiology. Meanwhile, the cortisol that was breaking down muscle tissue since waking has not been countered. The high-carbohydrate breakfast did not deliver the leucine threshold required to activate TOR. The muscle protein synthesis signal was not fired. The body spent the first 2 hours of the day in a state of net muscle protein breakdown, cortisol-driven catabolism that the wrong breakfast failed to interrupt, and then enter day. Blood glucose crash that will drive poor food choices through the late morning. This is not an occasional metabolic insult. For most seniors eating this breakfast pattern, it is every single morning, compounding over months and years into the sarcopenic decline they call aging. I want to stop here and ask you to be honest with me. What did you eat for breakfast this morning? Not what you usually eat or what you intend to eat. What did you actually put in your body in the first meal of today? Drop it in the comments because the answer to that question tells me immediately whether your mornings are working for your muscle or against it. And I think most of you already know what the answer reveals, the specific damage that the high-carbohydrate, low-protein breakfast does to muscle over time operates through 4 distinct biological pathways, and I want to walk through each one precisely so that the mechanism is clear rather than vague. The first is the failure to interrupt morning catabolism. The cortisol awakening response produces a window of protein breakdown that lasts from waking until adequate leucine from dietary protein enters the bloodstream and activates TOR. In a young adult, this window is short because the anabolic sensitivity of the muscle is high and the threshold for TOR activation is relatively low. In an older adult with established anabolic resistance, this window is longer, the threshold is higher, and the consequences of not meeting it are more significant. A 65-year-old who wakes at 7 and eats cereal at 7:30 has not countered the cortisol catabolism. The TOR signal was not activated. The muscle protein breakdown that began when cortisol rose continues through the morning. Multiply this by 365 mornings a year, and by the number of years this pattern has been in place. And the cumulative catabolic load becomes the primary explanation for a significant proportion of the muscle loss the person attributes to aging. The second pathway is the chronic insulin resistance cycle. Every time a senior eats a high-carbohydrate, low-fat, low-protein breakfast, they produce a blood glucose spike that requires an insulin response in an older body where insulin sensitivity is already declining, as it does with age, with reduced muscle mass, with reduced physical activity, and with accumulated visceral fat. The insulin response to the same glucose load is increasingly exaggerated. The cells are less responsive to insulin, so more insulin must be produced to achieve the same glucose clearance. Over time, the chronic overstimulation of the insulin system deepens insulin resistance, promotes visceral fat accumulation, reduces the metabolic rate by suppressing fat oxidation during the spike, and impairs the hormonal environment that muscle maintenance depends on. This is a cycle, and the grain-based breakfast initiates it fresh. Every morning, the high-carbohydrate breakfast is not an isolated insult. It is the daily trigger for a metabolic cascade that is making every other aspect of the senior's physiology worse. The third pathway is the fat-soluble vitamin deprivation that accompanies a low-fat breakfast. The vitamins most critical for muscle maintenance, hormonal function, and cellular health in older adults. Vitamins A, D, E, and K2 are fat-soluble. They require dietary fat for absorption. A low-fat cereal with skim milk and fruit juice delivers almost none of them. Vitamin D, which directly regulates muscle fiber function and which many seniors are deficient in, is not present in meaningful amounts in most grain-based breakfast foods. Vitamin K2, which directs calcium to bone and away from arteries and is found primarily in full-fat dairy and certain animal foods, is absent entirely. Vitamin A in the form of retinol, not beta-carotene from plant sources, which older adults convert with declining efficiency, is absent from most low-fat breakfasts. The chronic fat-soluble vitamin deprivation that results from years of low-fat breakfast eating contributes to muscle function impairment, immune dysfunction, and hormonal decline that many seniors attribute solely to aging rather than to long-term dietary patterns. The fourth pathway is the direct hormonal suppression that high-carbohydrate, low-fat eating may contribute to. Testosterone is synthesized from cholesterol and dietary fats. A breakfast that contains no dietary fat and no cholesterol provides little raw material for hormone production during the most hormonally active part of the morning. Research has shown that very low-fat diets are often associated with lower testosterone levels compared with diets that include adequate amounts of healthy fats from whole food sources. For an older male whose testosterone is already declining with age, the additional impact of a fat-free breakfast may not be insignificant. For an older female, steroid hormones involved in muscle maintenance and metabolic function are also dependent on adequate dietary fat intake. The replacement is simple: 3 to 4 whole eggs cooked in butter. This single change, replacing a grain-based breakfast with a protein-rich breakfast, changes the nutritional profile of the morning meal significantly. Eggs provide high-quality complete protein. The yolk contains choline, fat-soluble vitamins, dietary cholesterol, and nutrients that support overall health. Butter provides dietary fat that helps support the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. Add leftover meat from the previous evening if available. Add full-fat Greek yogurt if you want additional protein. Add bone broth on the side. The base is 3 to 4 eggs and butter. That is the morning meal every morning, without exception. I want to be direct about what continuing a grain-based breakfast may mean over time. Every morning it is eaten, the catabolic window may stay open longer than it otherwise would. Every morning, the TOR signal may not be activated optimally at breakfast. One potential opportunity for muscle protein synthesis may be missed every morning. A blood glucose spike may occur. The metabolic cycle associated with insulin resistance and visceral fat accumulation may continue. Every morning, the fat-soluble vitamin matrix is absent. The hormonal substrate is not replenished. The cellular maintenance processes that depend on it may receive less nutritional support. These are not dramatic daily events. They are quiet, cumulative, invisible until they are not. Until a person finds it more difficult to rise from a chair, climb stairs, carry groceries, or maintain physical independence, the body responds to what it receives consistently over time. That is how physiology works. It does not judge. It responds to inputs and produces outcomes. The next issue to consider is lunch, specifically why many seniors make the same protein distribution mistake at lunch that compounds the morning problem, and the simple adjustment that may help correct it. One final question: what does your current breakfast look like? And how many grams of complete protein does it contain? Drop the honest answer in the comments, because the gap between what many seniors eat for breakfast and what research suggests they may benefit from is one of the most actionable pieces of information available. I also want to address a question that is probably forming for many of you. What about oatmeal? Oatmeal has been the centerpiece of heart-healthy breakfast recommendations for decades. It is considered by many seniors, physicians, and registered dietitians to be a safe and beneficial breakfast choice. I am not going to tell you that oatmeal is a harmful food. I am going to tell you what oatmeal delivers in the context of what an older adult may need from the first meal of the day. A standard cup of cooked oatmeal delivers approximately 5 grams of protein. It delivers approximately 27 grams of carbohydrate. It contains very little complete protein, limited fat-soluble vitamins, and very little dietary fat. It also contains relatively small amounts of leucine compared with high-protein foods as a fiber source, and as part of a meal that already contains adequate complete protein, oatmeal can be a useful food as the primary or only component of a senior's breakfast. However, it may not provide enough protein to support optimal muscle maintenance. Regardless of how many decades of nutritional guidance have endorsed it as a healthy morning choice, oatmeal alone may not meet the protein needs of many older adults. The same analysis applies to the low-fat yogurt with fruit and granola breakfast that many health-conscious seniors eat. Low-fat yogurt delivers approximately 7 to 10 grams of protein per cup. For many older adults, that may still be below the amount needed to maximize muscle protein synthesis at breakfast. The granola adds carbohydrates, the fruit adds natural sugars. The total package may produce a blood glucose response while still providing less protein than an older adult might benefit from. Health-conscious seniors eating this breakfast every morning may believe they are protecting their muscle, but the actual protein intake may still fall short of optimal levels. The value of a breakfast should not be judged only by the label on the product. It should also be evaluated by what nutrients it delivers and how well it supports the body's needs. Low protein, high carbohydrate breakfasts may make it harder for older adults to maintain muscle mass as they age. The protein bar breakfast deserves the same examination. Most commercial protein bars deliver between 15 and 20 grams of protein. For many older adults, that may still fall below the amount associated with maximal muscle protein synthesis. Many bars also contain added sugars, processed oils, flavorings, and long ingredient lists. The protein is often a blend of whey concentrate, soy protein isolate, pea protein, or similar processed sources. While protein bars can be convenient, they are not always nutritionally equivalent to whole food protein sources. A protein bar may be useful in certain situations. However, it should not automatically be viewed as the ideal breakfast for supporting muscle health in older adults.